All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lipp. Yeah, I hope everyone can see my screen now. You can see that first of all, I'll talk a little bit about the format that I'm using. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Prezi. This is Prezi that I'm using. It's a free service that you can use online, and it's portable, so you can use it offline if you're not connected to the internet. It also lets you put PDFs out, which are quite useful, but they can be quite large, and that might be a problem for uploading to sites sometimes. But otherwise, it's a very useful program that is similar to PowerPoint. So that's what you're looking at. You can see that in our first webinar here, I have these bubbles over to the side of the screen. And you can see a preview of what we're going to be talking about today, what we're going to work through. The first, we need to have an introduction, as you'd expect, an intro kind of warm-up activity. And of course, we're going to have an outro too, where we have a chance for, an open chance for any questions or comments at the end. Okay, and those will be directed, in specific areas in both cases. In between, after we have our introduction, we're going to go on to talk about making a research proposal. We're going to just have a little activity just to kind of get warmed up with that. I want to talk a bit about the APA standards for different kinds of research. Again, I'm going to hopefully learn a lot about, your interest and levels in terms of these things, and then so I can adjust what I say about the standards. And finally, readability. This is where I get really into the writing section of today's webinar, where I wanted to give some comments about how you actually put your write-up, your paper together. And again, all of these, I have a lot of information here, but I really would like to balance it and to select it based upon what you need. So we can do that together with your feedback. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the first activity, which is the introduction. Of course, we all know why you have to do research as a university professor. In most countries, most universities, if your university is a research university, not all universities are, but as we heard in the introduction, a lot of universities in Vietnam require research. But as I'm asking here, this is not a kind of rhetorical question. This is a genuine question. Is why? I think this is important to think about, because it can vary for different universities in different countries and different regions. I think it's important to get as much information as you can to be successful. So if you actually can act as if you don't know anything, if you know a lot about research, it actually is helpful to begin like you're a beginner. So what I did at my university is, when I first started doing research at my university, I actually asked them this question. I said, what do you hope to, I understand how research can help the university, but why do you specifically, what do you hope that we will do? Will we focus on certain areas? Is there a kind of theme or a kind of approach that other professors have used at the university? Again, you have to kind of know your university administration a little bit in order to be really successful, and especially if you have a research department. I talk to the research department as well, just to be friendly with them, because you can get tips from them sometimes. Like, they can tell you about how to choose things that can get you more points, because each university and each department will sometimes rate your research at different ways. At my university, the research department has their method of assessing research levels and research points. But then the academic affairs department that does an evaluation for my position, they actually have a slightly different system. And so knowing those things, again, the small little details, knowing the things can really help you to be more successful. Sometimes you can do what you think is put my energy into that. It turns out that that doesn't have as much weight or as much importance. And so, but they can be, and they can move you forward quicker. I don't want to be pessimistic in any way, but I do want to point out to you, as a person who's done some research over 10 years, 15 years of research, I should point out to you that, as this quote says, this recent quote, if you read the black part, the cost of conducting research falls to the faculty member. This is something to remember. When you do research, you need to get funding whenever you can. And I noticed from our background, a lot of us, most of us are TESOL, humanities-based social science backgrounds. It's hard. It's harder to get funding in our disciplines than the hard sciences. So are you ready to spend some money? And it doesn't mean a lot of money, but it does mean that it's the small things that can be kind of annoying in some sense that you would have to do yourself, but expect it. I can tell you that most of the research that I've done throughout my career, I've paid for myself. Programs that I've needed to do data analysis, I've paid for largely. My university has not backed any of that. I have got some grants and some other kinds of financial support, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You can ask questions, or you can share your experiences actually as well, especially in Vietnam. If you've gotten funding in some capacity, then I think that's good knowledge for everyone else here. But again, expect to pay things for yourself in our discipline. That's the general unfortunate reality. And related to that, look at the black part. This is an older quote, but it's still true. You have to have a willingness to exploit your free time. This is probably the biggest thing that I think that I wish that people had told me when I first started researching, is how much time it actually takes. And again, that's why I really commend you all for coming here and joining me in this webinar, because it's your free time and you are busy. And I can tell you, research though is all about being successful in research in the long run is really often about something as simple as time management. Do you actually have time in your life to devote to research? The people who I know are the most successful in research, they actually have what I would describe as not a very good life. And I don't mean that to be critical. I just mean it as a truth that the most successful researchers that I know that are teacher researchers spend a lot of time at work. They tend to spend less time with their families or in personal pursuits. Their hobby is research. And so again, I'm beginning our series by kind of giving you a reality check here that it really does require, for success, it requires your ability to spend your free time on a regular basis and not just jump in and do a project and jump out, because that's actually harder than each time you have to kind of restart. And you also lose the connections and the kind of fluency that you have with research. Once you start doing research and publishing, you're going to find, as I'll show you an example, a recent example, I have an article coming out in January. And because of that article, it's already published online. Because of that article, I've already gotten about 17 emails from potential publishers who want me to publish in their journal. There are people who go through the journals, look at the newest publications, and they search out, they send invitations to publish. And these are really useful, again, because if you are a university professor who has to publish, you may have to pay to publish sometimes. And that's annoying. And that shouldn't be true. And in the hard sciences, that is not as true. So for us, again, if you have the devoted time and you stay with it, when you publish an article, you shouldn't think, okay, now I can take a break. Now I can relax and get away from it, and I'll come back in a year or so because that's when I need the next points, or 2 years. No, that's not the way it works. Unfortunately, the best way to do it is to stay connected, because you're going to get a stream of invitations, and those can build you can build relationships with those things. But the main thing you can do is to have actual doors opened for you where you don't have to pay to publish, and you have a willing, very receptive journal that wants you. They need you as much as you need them. So they are very, it changes the dynamic rather than you going into a new journal saying, publish me. Okay. So I like to start with those things. But let's begin a discussion so we can get to know what we know and who we are. Okay. So you notice I said honesty day. I put that on the bottom. Let's be honest always, please. I admit my mistakes, and you're going to hear a bunch of my mistakes because I think hopefully they can help you to not make those mistakes. And so please don't be afraid to share your mistakes or what you think are embarrassing moments or experiences, because they are very, again, a lot of famous people said that you learn nothing from winning, but you learn everything from failure, right? Because when you fail, you know why you failed, or at least you have a pretty good idea. And the more you fail, if you keep your attitude and keep going forward, you're going to learn a lot. So again, you shouldn't be afraid of those mistakes or admitting them. Okay, so we're going to have a discussion here on these 3 questions that I have for us. Okay, the first one is, again, how do you spend your work days? Let's talk about your work days, because again, that's the first key to success. Let's see how we can get research to fit into your schedule. Let's talk about your duties from school. Let's talk about the activities and personal things that are important to you. Let's talk about that, okay? Second, why do you need or why do you want to do research? Of course, maybe you're required to. This question is not just about asking that are you required to do it. It's really asking, especially the want and need, because if you can actually find something intrinsic, if you're a teacher of an education teacher, you know the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? Extrinsic, like exit, outside, external motivation, is because you have to. Your university forces you to get points. Everybody has different kinds of extrinsic motivation. But what we want to be successful is intrinsic. We want to find, why do you want to do it yourself? You need to plant a seed, or you need to recognize the seed in yourself, because only with a proper seed will you have that long-term motivation. Okay? So let's find out what that is, if you have it. If you don't know it, you can kind of talk about, well, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think this. I think that. Maybe this. Okay? And third, what's the biggest barrier for you for doing research right now? What's your biggest issue? What do you need help with the most? This could be a logistical thing related to number one question, or number 2, or it could be something, again, some knowledge or experience that you think you lack. Whatever it is, let's find out what it is. Let's talk together and do it. Okay? So I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment. And what I'd like to do, our administrators, is I'd like us all to be put into groups. It looks like we have Other than me, we have about 40 or so, 45, 44 participants. So I think if we could get us into groups of 4, that's what I usually like. 3 or 4s would be good, please. And what we're doing is we're going to the breakout rooms and we will talk about those 3 questions. Again, I'm not sure if you need me to review. You guys can, oh, I should say, of course, you guys know on Zoom that whenever you want, while I'm talking, you can hit the reactions button and you can raise your hand if you have a question, right? You can raise your hand. You know that you can put a thumbs up. You can react to me, right? You can put all of these gestures as you want, right? Okay. And of course, the chat is very useful too. Like over in the chat, please, as I'm typing here, please talk to me here. Okay. So you can go ahead and use the chat so we can, again, we want to open, we're far away from each other, but we want to have as many possibilities of being able to kind of feel closer as we can. So let's use the reactions. There's no interrupting. What I mean is you can interrupt. There's no problem with interrupting. You can stop me if you want to say something. Anything like that is fine. Okay, but let's use the chat. Let's use the reactions, but let's go into the breakout rooms and discuss those 3 questions and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay? One of the co-hosts is going to do that, I suppose. Yeah, there we go. You should have a message to join a breakout room now, like I do. Yeah, we're waiting for everyone to come back. Just take a moment. Maybe everybody's coming back now. Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome back. Yeah, I had a couple requests that like some were not able to see the questions that we had. This has always been an issue for me using Zoom, is how to show a screen while I'm not there, while you're in a breakout room. So again, if I could show you my screen real quick. Here's I tried to put this up real quick, but it's acting weird. It doesn't do like the one, I use Moodle in our university too, and it works a little, I think it's set up slightly differently here for showing a label. Usually I can put the label directly on, but you notice that I added a file here, the discussion 1 questions file, okay? So if you guys, do you guys have access? You can speak up yes or no. Do you have access to this page already, to the home page?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, I'll be sure and make sure that we have definitely for our next webinar, I'll make sure we have all this set up on the page and hopefully everyone will have access to it. But okay, these 3 basic questions that we were talking about though, I tried to keep it simple so that we could have our discussion move along. So how you spend your work days, just from talking to a couple groups, I heard that everybody's basic, if we kind of loop all these together, most everyone that I heard from really has to publish about every 2 years in international journals like index journals, and your time is your biggest barrier, but also some things like handling large data, like a big database can be an issue as well. So those are things. Does anyone else want to tell me right now additional barriers? Because this is what I need to know the most to be able to help you guys, to be able to, because I've crafted the other webinars basically, but I want to customize them on exactly what you guys need. So it'd be helpful if you guys could. And again, you can use the chat if you don't want to speak up. use the chat to type it, or you can speak up right now and tell us a barrier that you think is important that you'd like us to work on. Writing skills, I see, is one. Yeah, writing skills. We're certainly going to talk about writing skills. Using Zoom, I have to say, is a little bit, collecting data. That's good. That's very helpful for you all to just put brief ones there while I'm chatting. Practical topics.
Thấy thầy Lập hỏi có đề nghị bổ sung thêm một cái trưởng phòng vi sinh trong cái phòng vi sinh môi trường.
Yeah.
Ở cái cảnh người ta hỏi mà chưa có thì việc làm liền để tao ra quyết định.
Okay, I have to say that it's a little difficult to hear. Right. Thank you all. I think we should stick maybe to typing in the chat for these kinds of questions. This is what I was worried about, is if we have a big group and we try to speak together, that we might have technical issues. So yeah, I see all of the, if you're looking at the chat, you can see all of these wonderful topics, and I hope I can get a copy. I think I will be able to, of the text file, so I can use all these to really help me to hone things. Yeah, managing time. Yeah, sure. Research tool design. These are great. These are wonderful. Yeah. Updated articles, access to the Web of Sciences. Okay, yeah, sure. We're going to talk about all these things. Okay, great. Let's move on, because I see we're almost coming up on the 1 hour mark, and I want to move along with the presentation a little bit. Okay. Thank you. That was, again, if you guys have any other things that you'd like us to focus on, do use the chat. Yeah, I see some others are typing in. That's very helpful to me, because this is kind of a fact-finding webinar for me a little bit. I want to customize for you the best I can. But let me soldier on a bit and give you what I've got, just to show you the resources that I have in this way. Let me get past this. Here's some general comments, because I anticipated, like me, that time and management of your time would be the biggest issue. Okay, for doing research as a university professor, you know this. Have you read or heard about Malcolm Gladwell? He had a very famous saying from one of his books called Outliers, where he emphasized research that said that you need to have 10,000 hours to master something. That means that if you spend that much time, then you would be basically, you can't get anything easy. You have to spend the time to do it, right? But a lot of people, and the original researchers who he quoted, actually said, no, he kind of misinterpreted our data, our findings. He misinterpreted them. What that rule really was, it was studying violinists. The study was about violin players. And the study was about children who were they were studying to be professional violinists. And what actually the real 10,000 hours was, when they reach 20 years old, they will have the average, not the master, but the average violin player would reach 10,000 hours. Some of those, if you guys, again, if you know about distribution, right? The standard deviation was quite big. It was quite wide. So there was a big diversity of data points. That means that they weren't tight together like sometimes you would hope to have, but they were quite apart. So there was quite a difference, to where the median was quite different than the kind of mean, the average. It was quite different. And so what the point is here is that this 10,000 hour rule was kind of misinterpreted from the data. It's some people can get research and be able to do, or any other topic, can become a master in much shorter time. Some will take longer and never master. So it's what I'm saying is you really need to know yourself and pay attention to your own ability. That's the kind of point here. A joke that I like to say is you're not stupid. You just have bad luck when you think. This is so you have to make fun of yourself, and you have to keep it light, because you're going to have a lot of duties to do, and it's not going to be easy. So let me move this out of the way and point to this, some points here, some basic elements to starting or doing a research project. It's very helpful to save time if you look around at other professors and researchers. Your best way of learning is not from me really telling you, from someone lecturing to you. The best way is to just get in there, go look at research that is in your area, and at your university, if you can go look at the other professors in your department, you guys can get together and help each other, because you guys know your situation best. And you know that other professor who is successful is going to have the best advice for you that's really going to be the most practical, right? So collaborate. Again, research is can be a very lonely kind of, white lab coat by yourself experimenting. It's really the most successful researchers do not do it by themselves. They help each other. And so if I have a project and I ask you guys, I know you guys are interested, I'll pull you into my project. And then later, I hope to get that back. I hope later that I can join one of your projects. And again, as close as locally as you can do that, if you can find and have a group of people who are researchers in your school or your department, if you guys can go out and have tea together, or go do something where you guys can put your brains together and figure out how to kind of, in other words, instead of each of you having to do research, all the elements of research you have to do yourself from start to finish. Don't do that. It's too hard. You need to have a collaborator. You need to have someone else who will do part of it. And then later you can do the big part of the small part. You guys can divide the labor up. That is, all the successful researchers do that. Every one of them, not just some, every one of them except these geniuses. And we're not geniuses. We're people who are smart enough to know what our limits are. And so let's help each other. Select the right topic. Don't choose topics that you think are a good topic to get you published. This is the biggest tip I wish I had heard when I was first starting. And some advanced researchers, I think, still make this mistake. If you choose a topic, if you choose an area of interest or different areas of interest that are interesting to you, then you're going to be able to put more time into it. Again, your time is the issue. And if you are not into it, you're going to waste your time. If you're not liking your topic, or it's not something that's interesting to you and be able to put enough hours into it, you're going to waste time. Make a realistic plan. This is something I struggled with because I'm a person who thinks I can remember everything, I can organize everything, I don't have to write it down, I don't have to have a planner like your students do, right? With their schedules where they show where their classes are and where they have to. No, you need to be like a student. You need to write that down and be organized, because it really does, it helps you to get it out of your brain and onto the paper. And then you start to see where you can improve or make time work for you, or have, again, save time, how to use your time effectively. You got to write it down. You got to put it on a planner. And here's another tip that I wish I knew. Before you start your research project, start writing immediately. Of course, typing, or you can do it talking. You can do talking to writing, which is nice. Voice to text is very, very nice. What do I mean by this is that all of you, when you have ideas, you should write. It's just like a writer of fiction or a novel. you should always, when you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, that's something, and then you should have a way of collecting that, of putting it together, just to get it out. Because again, the more you get your brain going in research, the more information, the more kind of material you have to start working with. So right through the entire process, talk to yourself, get feedback too. Again, get feedback from anyone who's interested enough to give you real feedback. Like say, I have an idea about a research project. Or you say, oh, here's my research question. What do you think about that? And you can even ask your son or your daughter who are in elementary school, because sometimes they can give you some of the best insight. They may say, well, why don't you just do this? And you go, oh, I didn't think of that. Believe it or not, any feedback you can get, no matter how experienced or young or old, the more you talk, the more you get it out there and start working with it, you're already down the road. Instead of just kind of sitting on it in your head, trying to form the perfect plan. No. Okay. And here's my kind of motivation for you. Again, since our time is so short, I don't know if you know these two terms, these outlooks: strategic optimism, strategic pessimism. Usually you see defensive pessimism, and you see usually strategic optimism, in that they're put together. Of course, optimist means you think everything will work out fine. Pessimism means you worry it won't work out fine. Strategic means that you plan. Okay? So which one of these two strategies is better? Which one is for you? It depends on your personality, but you should have one of these two as your operating research principle. If you are a strategic optimist, it means you don't worry and you don't think you need to plan so much, and you are determined to succeed by your own desire, your own motivation. It's burning inside of you. This is more like the genius kind of, right? The kind of like, I'm just going to do it because I know it and I can do it. If that's your plan, fine. If that's your attitude. I am of the second kind, strategic pessimist. When I begin a research project, I think about all the things that can go wrong. But I do not feel sad about it. I am not being a pessimist. I am planning based on worry, based on wanting to get it right. I think, okay, what if I do it like this? What will happen? If I do it like that, what will happen? It's like playing a game of chess, so that you can, before you begin, at each step, you keep it in your mind that I am going to be strategic here. I'm going to plan and choose the best that I see. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to choose from the beginning. I'm going to save time in the process by being realistic about the likelihood of me failing or how difficult something is going to be. But I'm not going to let that get me down when it does, because I'm prepared for it. If it works out great, then I'm happy. If it works out terrible, then I knew it, I planned it, and I have an option to how to move on. I learned from it. I learned from how it was different from my expectation or from my planning. So I recommend that you adopt a strategic pessimistic attitude with your research. As Mark Twain says, or at least this quotation is attributed to him, continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. This is what all of the things I just said are about. You need to get moving. Right now, today, when you finish this webinar, start writing something, start thinking something, start organizing yourself. Whenever you have a minute, don't just pick up your smartphone and start scrolling. That you'd be surprised. Try to keep a log of that. I do this with students. I say, keep a log of how each time you write down. There's been studies, I can show them to you, of how much time is actually wasted by people scrolling on TikTok for 5 seconds, 10-second videos. They end up spending enormous amounts of hours where they, again, could have used that, as you guys could, for anything to get down the road, to start improving your research instead of, and by the way, you can use your phone to do your research, right? Remember, research doesn't have to be boring or topics that are, popular, but not what you're interested in. No, if you're interested in that idea, you're going to find what is interesting about it, and you're going to be better at communicating it with real integrity. Okay? Does anyone, I'm looking at the time here. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second here and say, okay, good, we have about an hour. I'm looking at the chat right now. I like to do this in between. Cannot access previous articles, finding and keeping mode. Okay. Yeah, okay, these are still some ideas from before. Does anybody have any comments? Again, the chat is the best way for us to type those down. No, I'm going to move on to the next area. Yeah, okay. Let's go back then. I'll check this chat again in just a minute after the next section. Okay. Research proposal. You guys know a research proposal, right? This is where you start to make your actual plan. This is when you've gone past the brainstorming. You've gone past the basic ideas, and you need to start kind of being more organized about actually kind of committing yourself. You're starting to put limits on yourself with a proposal. And proposals don't have to be sent to someone. You can make proposals to yourself. And I do. What's your problem or objective? What are you interested in? What significance might it have? Again, you've got to locate that thing that you want to study. And again, it's so important that you choose something that you are interested in, that you find, you kind of go, huh, that's curious, or that's, I wonder. Whenever you wonder about something, again, anything in your area, if it's about English, you can get a lot of different ideas by checking other research, but from your own life, things that you observe in the classroom. There's something called action research that is generally often not publishable because it's too amateur. I'm using quotation marks because that's the kind of negativity it has. Action research is often amateur feeling. So publications will say, no, we don't publish action research. That's just for your own practice to make your own better. But it's actually not true. As a reviewer, I can tell you, I can see lots of research projects that began as clearly as action research. And by the way, my PhD began as action research, and my latest publication, in fact, every single publication I've ever done was based on my own experience, my own classroom and research experience. So don't let them tell you that. It's just a matter of how you do it. That, when you know what action research is, it's actually practical. It's meant to solve a problem. It begins with a problem, and it presents a possibility of solving that problem. So it's the best kind of research. Don't let people tell you that action research, your own setting, is not important. It's not true. It's a matter of how you approach it. Literature review. This is where you find out how to take your action research, your local problem, the thing you recognize that's important. This is how you find it where it fits. Find out what others have said about this topic, and then find out, again, are you a confident person in reading research? I'm gonna give you a couple tips about that in our next actually webinar. I'm going to give you some tips about that, about how to read research. You need, of course, to think about how you're going to do your research. Are you going to collect your data through qualitative means, quantitative, or are you going to do a mixed design? Now, as I'm going to say later, usually most researchers have a kind of favorite, right? It's very few researchers who mix, who switch. You're either a qualitative or quantitative or a mixed person by your kind of nature. Are you a person who is more interested in kind of open-ended, or kind of more I guess, think about interviews, right? Think about collecting data by interviews. Think about collecting data by observation. Think about by kind of blending numbers and reaching conclusions. In other words, are you a person who's more interested in the kind of details of the process of research, or are you actually interested in the psychology, so to speak, of the research? Quantitative, generally, you're a person who likes to get into the details. You like to get in there with the numbers. You like to focus more clearly on one thing that you want to find a definite answer for, or you take that as your approach. A qualitative one, you're more interested in kind of figuring things out more generally. Although qualitative can be quite specific and quantitative can be more general, but basically, what is your kind of personality? Because if you try to do one that doesn't match your personality, you're going to be terrible at it. You're going to struggle. If you're not a person who understands probability and math and equations and doing like ANOVA, and regression analysis and things of that nature, you're going to have a hard time with quantitative. Not impossible, but again, your time requirement will be higher because you have to learn more before you can be successful. Mixed design is something I do. I like mixed design because I'm a qualitative kind of person generally. I've recognized that in myself, but I do like quantitative measures. I like quantitative data, but I do not like the quantitative data to limit me. I don't want to stop at that small point. I want to make more, I want to connect things. I want to make comparisons more that go outside a small defined problem. What are you? What kind of person are you? Okay, we can vote on this. My original plan was to have us generate a proposal right now. I was going to have us talk in groups and kind of just generally, just off the top of our head, I was going to have you guys say, okay, what's a problem that you guys would think you could do a research project on? If you didn't have to worry about publishing, that's the key. Don't think about publishing when you begin. Think about what are you interested in? What's significant? What seems important to you? You know, in your area, what's something that you think you would like to read? A topic that is interesting that you would go, wow, what's this? I'm interested. I want to keep reading. What is that? And then second, what do you know about that? Have you actually read anything about that already? And then third is, how would you go about trying to do the research generally? Again, very generally. Would you think it would be more qualitative, quantitative, or could you mix those? How would you do that? So I wanted to have you guys chat on this and then talk about it. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can check to see how to choose the right topic. Yeah, I'm going to think, yeah, I see a comment about choosing the right topic. I'll do that. But let's vote right now. Just very briefly, because I'm very aware of the time moving quickly. Let's vote. Would you like to chat or move on with another? If you'd like to chat, be able to go and chat about it, then what will happen if we choose chatting? Then we can kind of move our next webinar. We can move some of the ideas into the second webinar that we're going to do next week. Or I can just keep moving on. Okay, I have one vote for moving on. Can you guys say move on or chat, please? Okay, getting a few more move-ons. Okay, if I get a few more move-ons, I'm going to move on. Okay, we got enough move-ons. I'll move on. Okay, let me go back to it real quick then. Okay. This is something you can do yourself, again, that I think is very helpful. And I think before you begin a formal proposal, you should begin all research that way. And it's so simple and it seems so elemental. If you're an experienced researcher, it doesn't seem like that's helpful, but it actually is, because you keep coming back to the practical things that you are interested in. And you can forget that when you get so busy and so used to doing things. Okay, I'm going to talk about publication standards a little bit because this is, and the next two topics will come closer to what you guys have been asking for. You know about standards, right? Like what sections you put in your research, in your paper. When you do your write-up, these are the sections that you should have in there. It's very important to remember that they vary from journal to journal. I am going to show you the APA style standards, but they vary from journal to journal, and you need to check the journals that you are interested in. We're going to talk about that in our third webinar series, where I'll show you where you can go through the Web of Sciences and find the journal that fits best with your paper, with your idea. Okay. But generally, you can see that all publications have these sections, right? You have a title page that has the usual things on it, the researchers' names, the title, the abstract, usually less than 250 words. You have an introduction that again, basically you need to give some background, you need to give justification for why you're doing your research, and then you start to kind of hint or give literature either in the introduction or right after. You start to talk about the issues, and you see this in all journal articles. Methods are the next section, and this is when you, again, depending on, you have different styles, but you're gonna talk about what your approach was, what we call your conceptual underpinning. You're gonna talk about your participants and your techniques and how you analyze the data. In the results section, you're gonna talk about the significance of it. And it's very important to talk about surprises and to go talk about those research questions that you introduced in your introduction. That's when you talk about the background and issue, you need to give your research questions. And discussion, finally, is when you open up a little bit and you talk about the implications and you talk about limitations. So this is all really general for any, right? Let me show you these sections this is an article that I have coming out. It's already online, you can find it. This is in Computers and Human Behavior. This is a psychology journal. How did I end up on the bottom there? There we go. You can see that I've coordinated with a person from my university he's a beginner researcher, so I'm helping him, reaching back, and again, if you can collaborate, you can get on. John could not, this is Jean Paquette. He's a French Canadian who English is his second language. French is his first language. He speaks Korean, and he is a beginner and couldn't have done this by himself. And there he is in Computers and in Human Behavior, and he's got on there just by collaborating, talking to me, making connections. And I am kind of helping him. I'm mentoring him on the process. Okay, find people like that will help you. So you can see this topic is about smartphones. You can see the introduction page with the abstract here. You can see the introduction that I have here. Again, you can see that there's research questions clearly written. This is different in different journals, but this is generally what you want to do is at the end of your introduction or shortly after, make your research questions clear. I have 5 of these. That's a lot. Usually you want to have less than that. But mine are kind of, if you read them, kind of build on each other, which I can talk about how you form your research questions. Background, again, explores the topic. You can see that there are aspects that you talk about. You talk about the main aspects that you see. My research methodology is grounded theory. You might have heard of grounded theory. It's what I use for all my research because I think it matches my interest and my personality. If you find yours, you'll probably stick with a method too, or 1 or 2 different methods. So my methods, grounded theory, doesn't have you don't put a lot of literature at the beginning of your paper. It's very unusual. Okay. Then the next section is materials and methods. You can see here that I have the the participants, I have the methodology, and then I talk about how we analyze the data. You can see in the next section when I'm getting into the results, or the findings is called sometimes, you can see that you're going to start giving numbers and data and tables and graphs. You don't want to give too many. You can see I've given 2 tables here that have to do with, again, qualitative. This is a mixed methods study. So you're going to see here that this is kind of the qualitative section of data codes. You can see here that I'm giving, I'm talking about the main theoretical kind of findings here with the, you can see the theory here. And it's, again, I'm giving examples with quotations from the data that I collected qualitatively through interviews. Then you're going to see I have a kind of graphic to kind of show what my overall findings were. This is something I always recommend to all researchers. Give an overview in a graph form if you can. It's almost always when someone's looking through quickly reading your work, this is what will help them the most, is they see something like this and they go, oh, I see, he came up with 6 main categories in what he found. And how do they relate to each other? This kind of dynamic look of overview is really recommended. This can be very helpful. Another one is a process, where you show process overview. Like, here's what we did first, here's how we collected the data, here's how we did that. So that is a very good overview. I recommend it. You can see because it's a mixed design here, not just qualitative, it's got some quantitative. So you can see I did a little bit of statistics here. There's some statistics we're talking about you always have to do, usually related to reliability and validity. Very simple measures of like Cronbach's alpha for reliability and validity. You can do, depending on your data, things like Kindle's tau or other specifics. I don't need to get into those right now because it varies, but you're going to do that. You're going to show, so you can see about how many figures I've shown here. Overall, this is about average, having a few tables, having an overview, and having, if you have data that's number-based or statistical, quantitative, then you want to show the important things that you need to show. And you can see, finally, you have a discussion. And then you can see in this journal, they have also conclusions. Sometimes discussion and conclusions are put together. Sometimes they're separated. And sometimes journals let you have an appendix. Often these days, most journals have your appendix go separately on a website. That's the kind of thing now, is the open kind of sharing of data, the openness. That's why it's important for you to organize your data from the beginning. Put files on your computer and organize it very well, because then you won't have to do it later, because a lot of journals require you, more and more these days are requiring you to have a database, they say, but it's not a database, it's electronic files and organized so that other researchers can go kind of see how you got what you got. So you can see here, this journal lets me put an appendix. And so I put one appendix here with my survey. I had a survey, that was the quantitative part. And this survey questionnaire, you can see I like to tell my readers exactly what they need to see, what the participants were asked exactly. So that's, again, you only want to have what you think the reader needs to understand what you're talking about, okay? And again, you guys can ask questions about this on the board, on the discussion board I'm going to set up for you after class, where you guys can chime in and ask things. And again, I can answer any questions you have. But here is the APA. You can see the website address up there in the top corner. It's just apastyle.apa. And JARS are the journal guidelines you can see on the bottom here. If you just look at these guidelines, here they are. I'm going to show them to you, but you can see quantitative has been around for a while. The qualitative is relatively new, 2015 or 18 they started, and even mixed as well. These are the general kind of guidelines to help you get started, okay? here they are. You can see the red is the quantitative, the blue is qualitative, and nicely done. They blended the colors to make purple to remind you that it's mixed. So you can see that, again, the sections that they have and what the main things are that you need to put in these. Okay, this is very simple, very clear, very helpful. This is a general guideline for each of these styles. And you notice it also has comments here, guidance for author comments and guidance for reviewers. So it's pretty good to give you some basic information about sections if you're kind of new to it and you're not really sure. Okay. Here's an article also from the same website that actually explains, again, if you have time to read, start looking at, reading some background. This is actually helpful because it talks about some of, why did they make these? What were they thinking, and what problems did they imagine would happen when you tried to do your research? They're actually pretty conversational in this article. I liked it. Let me show you one section that was the most interesting to me. These different sections are interesting, but look at the yellow in the middle. Authors may also be asked to educate reviewers about basic qualitative methods assumptions or to defend qualitative methods as a field in articles focused otherwise. What does it mean? This is something that I highlighted here in yellow because this is my experience. And you're going to find this maybe shocking, but believe it or not, the people who, when you submit your papers to a journal, usually the assistant editor, they have lots of assistant editors, they are the gatekeepers, and they will look at your paper, and if it doesn't generally look like it fits, they will throw it back at you immediately and say no. And you don't mind getting that because it happens quickly and you can try to figure out why. Hopefully they give you a reason and you can learn from it. Again, you're going to get rejected so much, you have to be used to it. Think about rejections as information about how to be better. That's all you need to think about, because it doesn't matter why you're rejected. Everybody gets rejected. I get rejected all the time. And then you try something else. But in my experience, this is interesting. If you get past the gatekeeper, the assistant editor, when you submit to a reviewer, those reviewers often are actually inexperienced. They know less than you do. Especially, they may know less than you know about your method. Again, I do grounded theory. I can tell you that grounded theory is misunderstood by a lot of reviewers. They don't know what that is about. And so you actually, when you're interacting with them, and when if you get the chance to respond to them, you have to realize that they are kind of like a child who needs to be taken by the hand and kind of given very gently a lesson on what they don't know. And that seems strange, but you're going to be surprised. Once you know your method, if you follow a method or two that you really like, you will find often that you know more. You're the expert, or you know more than they do. And so how you negotiate with them will often be based on you being able to do that, to communicate to them that they have very valid, kind of comments or negative criticism, but you can show them that actually that is a valid comment for other methods, but not for yours. And your ability to do that, to communicate to them, is something that you just need to practice and do and get better at. And believe it or not, that's often the difference between being published and not published, is how you interact with those reviewers who actually know less than you do, and they make you angry because they say dumb things, because they obviously don't know, or they didn't read your article well enough. They actually sometimes, this happens with the assistant editors. They're very busy. They read your title, your abstract, and that's it. And they make a decision about whether it goes or it stays. So be used to getting rejections and get better and better at writing titles and abstracts and choosing topics that give you a better chance for getting through the door. We'll talk more about that later. Let me check the time real quick. We're good. We're doing all right. I'm going to go ahead through the readability. I'm going to check the chat real quick and see, can we get this file in PDF? Yes, I tried this. One of the participants here is asking if you can get this file. I gave a link to you. If you look here on the page, do you see here, once you get access to our materials homepage, if you look here under, I think it's on the bottom here. Yeah, there it is. I put a folder here for you. It's called Materials Discussed and Supplements. And here you can see that I'm putting a lot of different things that I'm talking about here in a form that's separate from the Prezis. So you can see these. I also have something here I'm going to point to about managing your project here, a kind of checklist to organize yourself. Okay, I'll talk about that at the end there. Yeah, different styles. Yeah, I will give you, okay, I will give you different examples throughout our webinar series. I give you my paper as the first example, but I'll be giving you examples and I'll be pointing out things in actual research papers that are published to make it real for you, okay? But also here, again, in the announcements, I put the Prezi link here. You can click, you can take this link and you can go to my Prezi. My Prezi was too big to give to you in PDF form, but if you click on this link, then you can actually navigate the whole Prezi yourself. You can see that you can do what I'm doing. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can look at anything you want to look at. I put it in white in case you want to try to print it, okay? All right, back to this real quick. Let me talk about probably the most important part, the readability. Let me get this out of the way. Okay. Okay. Editing and proofreading. Again, right now I didn't know exactly. Yeah, I could share the link. Okay, I'm getting a comment. I like the comment. I'll copy and paste this link. Oh, not that link. This link. I had it on there. I'll copy and paste this right now for you so you guys can get that. Let me change this to everyone. And there you go. There's the link. You can click on that one if you like right now and put that on there and you can see what, today's materials. Okay. Editing and proofreading, I'm going to just tell you some general stuff because I want to learn more about exactly what you need, but I'm just giving you general tips that I found from my experience and from my other colleagues who I work with, my collaborators. These are things that are true and helpful. And again, they save time. That's the main thing, saving time. Again, remember the sections. Why do I say that? Because again, don't lose sight. When you start to do details, you can get involved. And especially when you're doing a project from day to day, you do a part of it and then you come back to it later and you can get lost on the, where you are and what it is, because then you can make mistakes that cause you time loss. You have to go back and go, wait a minute, did I say that in the abstract? Oh, not the abstract, but did I say that in the introduction? Did I put it in the methods? And sometimes that can be confusing. The introduction and the results sometimes are very similar to each other because you're reacting to what you said before. So it can be confusing. So again, staying organized is very important. Writing in your journal is very helpful. Okay, here's the first thing. Set a timetable and stick to it. Again, the more detailed, specific you can be, the better. You have a time that is your research time or your time to do, if you can. If somehow you need to do it. Locations, choose a good location. This is so many people. I have a son who pops in the door here with me in my office, and he's a wonderful distraction. And I can tell you though that if you aren't able to manage and you find that your family is, you know, things are interfering, or if you're at the cafe and it's not as quiet as you think it should have been, and it starts, you change. Pay attention to your surroundings because that affects your productivity. Avoid trying to finish any area as you write. When you're writing, you don't want to feel like you have to finish the introduction. Then you have to go on to the method. Then you have to go on to the analysis, the findings, the discussion. Don't feel like you have to do it piecemeal like that. You're going to be more productive if you work on the thing that is in your mind or the thing that needs to be worked on at that time. I am completely mixed up when I do it. Every single project, I work on this, I work on that in pieces. And then later in the project, I start to make sure. But that's why it's important for me to keep the sections in mind, because you go work on a section, you come back, and then you start to notice, wait a minute, I need to focus more on the introduction and that literature. I need to go back and fill that up more. I need to get going. Bullet points. When you're making an organized chart of what you're doing, keep bullet points going. Keep bullet points going. Even, I mean, just a placeholder. If you don't have anything in that section, just put a bullet there and say, like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about that, even if you don't know what it is. Don't overestimate how much you can do. It always takes longer. You always get distracted and you always get slow. It always slows you down. So be realistic when you make your plans so that you don't get frustrated with yourself. Make realistic plans. It's always going to take longer than you think. Okay, here's some specific writing style tips that will save you time as well. Number one, use plain English. This is so true for anyone, native speakers or second language learners. Many of you guys are quite fluent like native speakers. Many of you are. Please resist the temptation to sound like a native speaker, because it's a huge temptation. And it's a temptation for native speakers too, to use lots of academic style writing. Look at the second bullet point, cut that out. Do you see? There's an example. However, it is the case that the following is true. Watch out for that kind of language in your writing. Do not do that. It's fluff. It's a waste of time for everyone. Don't put, the big clue is don't put dummy subjects. Avoid dummy subjects. You know what a dummy subject is? It's a placeholder, like it. Sometimes it can be referring to something else, like, oh, you know, that smartphones caused a problem for these students. And then you say, they were a problem because. That's different. That's just using a pronoun. That's not a problem. But when you start a sentence with there is, there are, it is, it was, usually you can cut that out. That's a signal that you're kind of just giving fluffy language that could be shorter and save you time and be more clear. Mimic good writing in your area. That's the third one. Again, plain, simple, I can't say it enough. Plain, simple English is better. If you can, the simpler you can say something, the better. The less words you can use, the better. You're always going to find that you go too long. You need to edit down. You never need to edit up. It never happens. I've never heard of a writer who writes too little and then has to come back and write more. It never works that way. So save yourself some time and just keep it simple. Remember, you can always go back and add, you know, nice words or adjectives that are more scholarly or interesting. You can always make it more elaborate. And sometimes you will want to do that, right? Because you want to make it more clear, because choosing the right word is important. But do that later. Don't do it at the beginning. That's for your final, you know, as you're moving on in the final parts, the final drafts, add the more, you know, interesting language. Okay, number 1, 2, 3, 4 is avoid opinion writing. Stick to the facts, direct implications, no coloring language. Again, this is one of the biggest problems when I read people who are asking me if this is good writing, if this is something good. This is one of the biggest things, is that they, in their research, they're just, as we say, beating around the bush. They're talking about the problem, but they're not discussing the problem. They're saying all the things around it without actually saying it directly, simply. Usually when I read something, I read 2 or 3 lines, I can reduce it to one simple statement. Next, similar to that, clarity. Make your complex ideas simple. Use graphs and figures only when you need to, and do not talk about them. It's kind of 2 ways. Why do you use a graph or a figure? It's because you cannot say it simply. It requires a picture because a picture communicates detail, complex things simpler. Make sure that your graph is simpler. If you can say it more simply, don't use the graph. If you use a graph, don't repeat what the graph says when you're writing. Just only point out what you need to. Again, keep in mind the reader. The reader is looking at you're reading along and saying, okay, here is my point. This data showed this thing. And then you say, this thing had these aspects. Figure 1, see figure 1. That's when you point them to those extra information. Often the figures and the graphs are to provide filling for your main point. You make a main point in the text, and then you point to the proof in the graph. Be honest. Again, stick to the facts. That's a kind of obvious one. I don't want to linger on it. I see the time is moving on. Keep in mind the research framing. Again, I'm emphasizing the same kind of thing again, keeping in mind the idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Your research questions are why you are writing. Everything you say should be directed towards part of answering those research questions. Stick to it. Don't feel like you need to give some great paper, some great ideas. Your ideas are going to be successful if they're related to your research and very clearly defined research questions. Use consistent style is the last one on here. Verb tense is the biggest inconsistency I see in research papers. If you say, again, I have a little graph where I'll show you what tense you use for different sections of your paper, because the tense changes. Whether you use past tense, present tense, or like present perfect, right? You want to be consistent with that. So pay attention to that. And pronouns, again, if you say we can see this, we can see that, it's shown in our data. That would be a little weird, but you want to be consistent. If it's the collective plural, we, our, or they, their, or it's. Again, if you're talking about participants that have a gender, then you might want to stick and make sure that your genders are consistent. And these are things that you can overlook, and they waste so much of your time later if you don't pay attention to them from the beginning. Okay? Relevance. The first one I just talked about was talking about just being simple and clear. Now, relevance and your approach. Begin your research with your literature review. Again, once you get your idea and you think you have an idea, you have to go check, because you will not get published unless you fit somewhere, right? The more you read, again, this is why writing research and publishing takes so much time, is you need to read a lot. And you need to be really good at reading and reading quickly without time waste. We'll talk about that. I have some tips about how to read and how to read quickly and how most readers read. But you need to be good at reading and you need to go look and really cover a wide range of the most important aspects you can think of. So when you come up with your idea, like I think I want to do this research project, immediately start brainstorming, make a kind of cluster map. Like, here's my idea, and here's all the things that I can think of that might be related. For example, my latest research, I said that I was dealing with smartphones. How do they affect students' lives and their academics, right? Smartphones. So when I first came up with that idea, it was because my students were using it. It was from a research project I had done before. And so I started thinking, well, about smartphones, I need to think about, well, how do they use them? You know, how do they use them? Why do they use them? In what way do they physically use them? And what do they think what do they think about? What are their thinking? What's their perception? And then what's their actual actions? I need to look at both of those, because that's a big problem in research, is that people will talk about what they're asked, what is your opinion? But often that's not what they do. The difference between what you think, what a participant says, and what they do is often overlooked in research. So when you first start out, think about it from a real perspective. What are they going to say about it? But what are they going to do about it? I need to consider those. So then I go look at the research, when I go look at the literature that's already been published, and see how they handled those things. Did they talk about what the participants, their ideas were, and what their actions were? Because often they don't match. But any aspects you can think of. And use an annotated bibliography. Have you ever heard of an annotated bibliography? This, if you remember anything from my presentation, this is the one thing you should remember. This is the thing that has helped me save time the most in my research: annotated bibliography. I'll show you an example of what my annotated bibliography is, how I do them, okay? But again, your argument begins here. What I mean is, when you look at research, you should be kind of having a conversation with what you're reading. If the paper says, this is what I think, this is what we saw, you should be agreeing or disagreeing, or kind of reacting to it, because that's how you're going to generate your research questions and your approach to your research, is you're responding to what has been said and done before. So you want to start an argument right away from reading. Have you heard of Endnote, the program Endnote? This does annotated bibliographies for you automatically, kind of. You can set them up. It's a time saver if you're a computer person who likes programs. Endnote, I don't know if it's available at your school, but we can get that. Some schools provide that free. I don't know in Vietnam. Okay, next. Build on what was said before. Again, your argument is it has to be in relation to the literature. If you try to just do a research project and you don't really know what's out there, you don't react to it, you don't fit into it, then you're not going to get published. Because the more your research fits into a missing area, the better chance you have. And you have to find those missing areas by reading and by being critical, like thinking, okay, I see there's something, this topic and this topic, but what about the middle? Well, I need to go look somewhere else and find it. So that's what you do. Okay, moving on. Follow the structure and style of writing in your genre, even in the journal. Again, following examples is the best way to save time. I don't need to tell you anything here, really. The best example would be, okay, if I could sit with you and talk with you one-on-one, you would tell me, okay, I want to do this kind of research. This is my kind of way of collecting data. This is my way of my personality. Then I could immediately grab a few journals. And I'm going to show this to you in the third webinar. You can grab a few journals that fit your kind of idea, and then you can go look at the styles that they have. And that will, again, you immediately start beginning your research by actually writing the paper outline. That saves time. Like, this paper requires me to have these things, and here's what I need to do. So now I can go, when I'm designing the style of the research, I can have that fit so it fits nicely into those sections. Again, you want to kind of customize. Expect to have 3 edits. That means when you're completely done, you think you're done. You have, woohoo, I'm done. I can just send this off. I'm done. Nope. Expect 3 more edits, 3 more processes, because you always need to have 3 more. Keep a journal to track your project with notes. Again, I can't emphasize this more, but this is something that we do in grounded research. We write notes to ourselves because then I know what yesterday Tom was saying. Yesterday, Thomas thought this. And when I'm next week, Thomas, I might have a different idea and I got to remember what I was thinking. And it can save me time if I can remember quicker with it written. And it helps me to be more logical and organized. Okay, here's an annotated bibliography. This is how I do it. I go look at a journal article and I just kind of briefly, I'll show you how to read it. Again, later I'll show you how to read an article, but once you've read it, you kind of look through what you need to, then you're going to write a citation, which has the name of the article and the authors. It has it, it's ready to go into your reference section. Make it reference ready. Whatever reference style you're going to use, like APA or MLA, whatever style you have, go ahead and make your citation perfect so you don't have to go fix it later. Save yourself time. Right now, make that citation perfect. And there's websites I can show you, like Purdue OWL. I'll show it to you later about how to do that. And so you write the citation, then you write what is called the gist. Gist means the main idea. What is this article telling me? And it's very important that this is very important. Do not make a summary of what is written. Do not make a summary of what is written. Make a summary of how that idea fits with your thinking. This is a note to yourself. So in other words, if it says that students' perceptions of smartphones are mixed. Some students like their smartphones and think they're helpful. Some students worry about them because they take their time. Okay, if that's what this article is saying, I would not write that as the gist. What I would do is go, okay, my research idea is trying to figure out what is the best way to help students handle their smartphones, because I think they're a problem. That's my general hypothesis or approach. I think that they're a problem for everyone, including students. So therefore, when I read this article, I'm not going to say like that. What I'm going to say is, this shows mixed results. This shows mixed results. That's all I need to write in the gist, really, at the beginning. And if it looks like it has very good information that I want to talk about or use, then I'll write more. If it's not something that looks so interesting or directly going to help me, then I'll just write a summary like that. This has mixed results. And then, and again, you can be more detailed based on what your approach is, what your idea is. Like, this has mixed results about their perceptions of productivity, right? So you might say this is related to productivity, it's mixed. Do you see how that's the kind of thing you write to yourself? Because then later, that it already fits into your argument. You can say, is this something I need something, because later when you're writing your findings, or you're writing something and you go, I need something that talks about the productivity, and I need something that fits about mixed. So you go and look, okay, there it is, I got it. And then you can go look in more detail and find, and finally, quotations. Anything that looks significant, anything that is interesting to you, and again, as it relates to your paper, anything that looks interesting to you, write the quotation. And again, do it perfectly. Just copy and paste it perfectly with quotation marks, put the page number, put the author's name, already do the referencing in your style. It'll save you time. Then you don't have to spend all this time doing it. Some people don't do it that way, but I do. I use my annotated bibliography since, you know, I started before there were computers. Before, you know, I'm old enough that I'm kind of analog and digital. And I didn't do research formally before there was computers, really. I did it right when we were starting, but I can tell you that I used to do annotated bibliography by hand when I was in school. And when I'm doing that, I didn't do it perfectly. I didn't do quotations perfectly. I just kind of did it pretty well. But I had to go back and spend so much time to fix them later. But that was part of no digital back then. But now with digital, you can copy and paste perfectly. You can get it right immediately, and you don't have to go back and fix it later. Or again, it saves you time when you're doing your proofreading later. Again, wherever you can save time and cut corners, do it. Okay. Questions. I'm looking now. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second after we talk about questions. Okay, I'm reading questions now. So you can type your questions, any final questions that you have. Yeah, okay. I see we have some administrative thing helping there. Good, good. Can a research completely literature-based? Find answers based on previous studies. Yeah, do we have to include all 3 citation gist? And okay, these are good questions. So the questions I'm getting, here's the question the first question is it possible to do research where I don't have to go do my research? All I do is go look at the literature. Yes, those are called literature reviews. And depending on the topic and the journals, you need to go look at journals for your topic, because some topic areas allow you to publish a kind of literature review, especially if you do things that are called meta analysis. You know, meta, M-E-T-A, meta. A meta-analysis means that you go and look at many papers on the same subject. This is called secondary research, right? Secondary research means you don't do research yourself. You go and look at others' research, and then you try to show something important about what you found. So you'll go to 20, 30, 40 articles, 50, 70, it depends on your time, but you'll go to a bunch of articles, and then you will find something that is common between all of them. You can find what the results were that they all agree upon. And that is very helpful for researchers. When you're reading meta studies, as we're reading research, that can be some of the best research because it tells you what everybody agrees on, and it shows you what is missing, what is lacking. And that's where you can find your next research project often. So that's secondary research. But that is, I can tell you, if you do secondary research like that, it's harder to get published than doing your own. But it takes less time because you don't have to spend the time doing research. You spend your time all reading and analyzing what was there. You're really just comparing. That's all you're doing. And you have to be good at that. You have to be good. The better you are at comparing, if you're a good analyst, that's your strong point, then yes, I could say you could do that. The second question was, do we have to include the same, 3 citation, the 3 things, citation, gist, and quotation? When you do annotated bibliography, no, it's up to you. What the annotated bibliography is, it's a kind of a reference card. It's like when you get done, after you've done your initial research review, like your literature review, when you have, maybe you've read 20 or 30 articles, then you have 20 or 30 annotated bibliographies, then you don't have to go back to the original articles. You never have to go back to it until later if it's really useful for you. You can just get rid of all that paperwork or those files, because I print it out myself. I print out my annotated bibliography because I have it in hand, like in front of me, when I'm typing, I like to look at it and I can go, okay, I'm looking for that, you know, that mixed results productivity, smartphone, mixed productivity, got it, there it is. And then I can say, can I use one of those quotations? Does it fit here? Or can I paraphrase it? How do I fit it into to make it readable? You know, how does it fit into my argument? That's what I care about. And the annotated bibliography, however you write it, it should be a shortcut so you don't have to go back to your original stuff. I see we're getting close to the time, so I'm going to take one more question here and I'll be done. Can you recommend any software to organize articles and what we can get from the articles to use in our paper? Software, yes. There are a number of software programs you can use. Endnote is the best one for doing literature. There are others I can show you like Endnote, but you don't have to use them. I actually don't use Endnote. I began using Endnote, but I actually have my own system. I use Microsoft Word and I just copy and paste it and I have my own system and I can show you examples of that, how I do it. But again, whatever works for you. But for Endnote is good. For qualitative, we're going to talk about that with data next time. There's a lot of qualitative programs. There's, of course, some of the most famous quantitative ones like SPSS and SAS. Those are expensive. There are some alternatives. There's one called R that I'll show you that I haven't used, but there is a free one. I'll talk about that next time. Yeah. Yeah. Is there any way to get, I guess we're down to 2 minutes here, but is there any ways to get access to articles which are not free access? Yeah. Do you guys have free access from your university? Do they subscribe to databases? I would say just a quick answer, if you have trouble getting access, Google Scholar. Let me show you real quick. Just look at this real quick. Oops. Yeah. If you go to Scholar. I'm surprised I don't have it here. Scholar.google. That's close. Let's just do that. Is that it? There. Oh, there it is. Yeah, good. Oh, okay. I clicked the button. There it is. Google Scholar. You know Google Scholar, right? Google Scholar, what you can see, look what I looked at last time, grounded theory study. See, I was illustrating this to someone, but do you PDF is available? That means that you can get that article. You can click on it. If it's got a PDF, you can click on it and it should allow you to download the full article and you can get it. There's a lot of them on there. Some of them are HTML, like Word documents, but you can tell it here. You can tell it, you can put PDF in there and then you end up with more PDFs, a bunch more, or DOCs. So I'll tell you more about how to do searches where you can actually very quickly get what you need, again, for free, for when you don't have access. Okay, I think we're about done. Again, yeah, Researchgate, someone else is talking about Researchgate and academia. Yeah, I can talk about those too. Those are good ways to get free research from other researchers. There's limitations to that though. Often publications have put limits on that, but yeah, it's a good sharing. Oh, there's a good link there too to Sci-Hub, SE. Yeah, good. Look at the chat. You can see a couple links there, or at least one. That's good.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thomas. I'm afraid this is the time. We are going to start the closing seminar of another webinar series very soon. So thank you very much for a wonderful webinar today. I think the participants are really interested in your presentation and discussion as well. As you can see in the messages in the chat box, a lot of questions and sharing from the participants. As promised, tomorrow we will send you the accounts to access the Tech4Teach platform, in which you may find a lot of extra materials provided by Thomas. And today, actually, we have about 90 registered participants. However, today is only half of them show up. So, because the number of participants for this webinar series is limited. So please try your best to arrange your time to attend all the webinars to get the e-certificate. And if you don't want to join, let us know so we invite other participants, because there are many researchers and lecturers in Vietnam are interested in this webinar series, but the number of participants are limited. Once again, thank you very much for joining the webinar today, and see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all. Bye-bye.